Many people have raised the points that it's challenging, if not impossible, to completely eradicate Hamas from the Gaza Strip, which there's certainly some truth to that. That being said, Israel has done quite a good job of degrading the capabilities, the military capabilities, and the infrastructure, the vast infrastructure that the terrorist group uses to carry out operations. So, in that respect, it's gone quite well. But it's a slog of a war, and there's still a long way to go. I think the IDF has already begun operating and moving towards the sort of next phase of the war, so to speak. And we're looking at more targeted operations, more precision, which is something that Israel's allies and the international community have been calling for quite some time. And we will probably see a continuation of Israel seeking to eliminate not only Hamas leadership, but Hezbollah leadership, and frankly, any of Israel's adversaries, regardless of where they are in the world. I know many people in the world, myself included, are concerned that things could spiral. Conflict, war, history tells us that things can spiral quickly, and things can happen unpredictably. That's absolutely the case when it comes to Hezbollah. But at the same time, I don't believe that Hezbollah wants this to become a bigger issue than it already is, a bigger confrontation than it already is. And I believe that Hassan Nasrallah has said as much. They will probably continue to sort of poke the bear, Israel, in a sense, but I don't imagine that Hezbollah wants to turn this into a full-scale operation where missiles and jets are flying over Beirut any more than they have been already. Israel remains the only country that ever, or at least that I can remember, that is criticized for sufficiently defending itself. And some have gone so far as to say it's the only country in the world that is not allowed to win a war. When it comes to claims of genocide, there's no evidence in any way to suggest that Israel has been carrying out a genocide in Gaza. If they wanted to carry out a genocide, they would have murdered 2 million Palestinians on October 8th. The Palestinian population has gone up tenfold over the last 70 years. And if you look at other wars, I mean, and I've said this before, civilian casualties are part of the terrible element of war that is, violence, that is suffering. And if you look at the numbers, this is not particularly unique or different than other numbers we've seen in other modern, urban, densely populated conflict. Well, going forward, I would echo much of what the international community has said in terms of being more precise, continuing to be precise, continuing to target high value assets in terms of Hamas, in terms of Hezbollah, and of course, continuing to seek limited civilian casualties, something that, frankly, I believe Israel is among the best in the world when it comes to limiting civilian casualties. So that's what I would hope that they would do going forward. But of course, they're going to have to think very, very hard and strategically about what this is going to look like after these operations, after the second and third phase have wrapped up. What does it look like in terms of a long-term security in Gaza and governance in Gaza? And that's going to be a very challenging situation for the Israelis to be in. The US, the UK, other nations that are very closely aligned and great allies of Israel know what a precarious situation Israel is in to have tens of thousands of barbaric terrorists at their border. But at the same time, they are not the ones in that neighborhood. And so I believe that there's probably some degree of separation between them, just in terms of the fact that they don't really know what that's like. People in America don't know what it's like to live with a terrorist group on their border, to have Hamas, to have an organization akin to ISIS living there as a threat. that's not something that people can really understand unless they've lived through it. And so I think in that respect, Israel could very well take steps or pursue measures that are hard for others to understand or appreciate. And indeed, they might disagree with, but unless you're there living with that threat, and unless you know people or have family members or colleagues or friends who have been murdered by terrorists, it would be hard for people to really understand things. So there could be some separation there, but I think by and large, the international community, Israel's allies, are on board with what they're going to do going forward. I think for the time being, Bibi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has to remain in the driver's seat, just in terms of continuity, in terms of carrying out the next phases of this war. But to your point, shortly thereafter, I believe, as do many others, as you've suggested, that it's time for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government to move on. And going forward, in terms of the next phases, in terms of governing Gaza, what does that look like in the future? It can't be Netanyahu. It can't be this government that controls that or dictates that, and that carries out those operations. I actually think that if another government comes in, another prime minister comes in, that would add legitimacy to Israel's approach to a post-war Gaza going forward. So I think it's time for Bibi to go and somebody else to come in, but not right now. I'm not sure that at the present time, America is well prepared to confront Tehran. Um, Given what we've seen, I've been quite surprised by the lack of attention, politically, militarily, that America has paid to confronting the threat that comes out of Iran. And this threat is only going to get worse. I mean, they're continuing to move towards a nuclear weapon. They're continuing to support operations, terrorist operations from Lebanon to the Gaza Strip to elsewhere, and they're using countries around the world, including Canada and the UK, to finance their operations, to recruit, and to plan phases of their future confrontations with Israel and of course with America. So I think people need to wake up, the Americans, Canada, other nations, and say, if we don't address the threats emanating from Tehran soon, it might be too late. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a broader, a larger scale military confrontation with Tehran in the near future. I still believe that peace does have a chance. I continue to remind myself that these issues, in the grand scheme of things, are relatively new. If we look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict, we're looking further back than 1948, than the reestablishment of Israel. But again, when we're looking at time and generations, these issues are going to take probably another generation to improve. They're not as old in some ways as people think they are. And I believe that peace can be achieved. We've seen with the Abraham Accords that Israel has reached peace treaties, diplomatic relations with a number of Muslim countries, a number of Arab countries. And I believe more of that is around the corner. A lot of these countries also see Hamas as a threat, Hezbollah as a threat, and radical thinkers and radical groups as a threat to their own nations. And again, to your previous question, I think that countries like Saudi Arabia see that there is a role here for them and Israel together to play in combating these threats in their neighborhood going forward. So I do think peace will be achieved, but it's going to take time. And I do believe it's going to take a multinational sort of effort to get there.